Hello, I'm Matt from Leicester Library's Neighbourhood Services and I'm here today to tell you a story. Now, it's a sporting story and it's a true story and it's called How to Start a Football Club. On a cold November morning in 1884, 11 young men stood ready in a muddy field off the Foss Road in Leicester. If you'd have been a passenger on the Midland Railway Company's Leicester to Burton line on that day, you might have seen them as the train clickety-clack, clickety-clack, clickety-clack passed. In their black shirts with a blue sash, crisp white shorts down to the knee, of course, and black socks. They'd have been jumping and clapping arms around their bodies to keep warm on that cold morning and with puffs of white breath blowing on their hands. They were waiting for a magic moment, a historic moment. The train driver might have seen them too, and boop, boop, 2 blasts from his steam whistle. But that's not the whistle these lads were waiting for. They were waiting for the referee to blow. And a few seconds later that happened. The shrill, sharp whistle, and it was time for kick-off. The first ever kick in the first ever match of Leicester Foss Football Club. Now, you might never have heard of Leicester Foss Football Club, but I'm sure you've heard of Leicester City Football Club, the greatest club in the land, the winners of the Premier League 2016, the club whose thousands of fans, the Blue Army, regularly pack into the King Power Stadium for home matches. And when you think of that fantastic, world-famous club, it's probably hard to imagine that back in 1884, most people in Leicester hadn't even heard of football, well, not association football that we call soccer, because Leicester in those days, well, it was a rugby football town. You know, rugby, the odd-shaped ball under the arm. Well, this is the story of how all that changed, of how us Chisits, oh, don't worry about Chisits, it's a story for another time, but how we swapped our odd-shaped rugby balls for sensible round ones, and how the word football became associated with a game that's actually played with the feet. And of course, it didn't start there and then on that November morning. There had to be some planning. And where it started, in fact, was in a school and in 2 churches and a shed. That's right, it's a garden shed. And we'll come back to the shed. But the school, it was called Wiggerston Hospital School. Building's still there today, it's part of Leicester Cathedral. It's now called St Martin's House. But in those days, it was a school for boys, and forget about the word hospital, it did not mean that these boys were sick. In fact, they were a healthy bunch. Because you see, they all went to either Friar Lane Baptist Church or Emmanuel Baptist Church, and those 2 churches, well, they were part of a thing, like a movement that was spreading across the country in those days. It was called muscular Christianity. And, well, what muscular Christianity taught was that if you kept your body strong and fit, it kept your mind strong and fit, and that gave you a good moral character. Now, I don't know if that's true, you'll have to make your own mind up about it, but what it did mean was that in those days, those types of churches often had sports teams. And so our 11 lads, they went to that school and those 2 churches, and it was Arthur Douglas Ashby who invited them, well, to meet in his garden shed at the Ashby family home. And the house is still there, but the garden, well, King Richard Road now runs over the top of that. But picture the scene. Back in 1884 actually, 11 young men packed into the shed, smelled of compost and grass cuttings and 2-stroke fuel, and they were discussing how they were going to start the club. Well, they all agreed that they'd pay 9p each, subs, to get the club going, and another 9p for, well, to buy a ball. And that was 1 and 6p in old money, and in new money that would be 18p. And you can do the maths yourselves. That's 18p times 11. That's how much it cost in those days to start a football club. But now they've paid the subs, they've got to decide what the club's called. Well, the argument started, it raged back and forth, and one of the lads said West End Wanderers, but no, that was rejected, and this name and that name were proposed and rejected until at last, active club secretary Frank Gardner, he slammed his hand on the table and he said, "Stop, lads, look at us, here we are, we're West End lads, we're right next to the world famous Foss Way, a Roman road that runs the length of England. And everybody knows the name of that road, just as one day everybody will know the name of our club." Now, if you're wondering how I know this, well, if you go deep into the archives at Leicester City Football Ground, you can find a booklet, and if you pull it out and blow the dust off it. Now, John Hutchinson, the club archivist and historian, he says there's no dust on it, but go with me here. You take it out and you blow the dust on, and you read that it says, "The rise and progress of Leicester Foss Football Club." Published in 1893. It was published to mark the start of their 10th season, and it has all the details of that meeting in the shed, of the subs and the way that the club got its name. So that's how I can tell you that to this day. And that really is how Leicester Foss Football Club was born. And I think it's about time we got back to the match, don't you? So the whistle's been blown and kick off. And well, Leicester Foss are playing against Syston. And the Syston lads, they're giving Leicester Foss a really tough run for the money. Most of the first half has gone and no goals have been scored. But then, at the last moment, as it was the style in those days, Sam Dingley dribbling the ball this way and that, past the Syston defences and slam, blam, into the back of the net. The first goal is scored just as the first half whistle is blown. Coming out for the second half, Leicester Foss lads are buzzing. They've scored, they're 1-0 up. And it's not long before Sam Dingley puts another goal into the back of the net. And then 2 goals from Hilton Johnson and 1 from Arthur West. And that's it. 5-0 victory to Leicester Foss against Syston in the first ever match. Now, it's true that Leicester Foss Football Club is now called Leicester City Football Club. That started the name changed in 1919. And well, there's many other differences. You know, in 1919 they were playing in a football ground on Filbert Street, but now at the beginning of this century, the 21st century, they moved to a brand new stadium. When it first opened it was called Walker Stadium, but it's now called King Power, as you probably know. And, you know, those lads, those 11 lads, they all lived in walking distance of one another's houses. So it's probably hard for them to imagine just how big Leicester Football Club would become. And the fact that players come to play in Leicester from all over the world. But even if they couldn't quite imagine what it would be like today, I'm sure they would be proud. So we're going to have a big cheer for the lads who started Leicester Foss Football Club that later became Leicester City Football Club, and I'm going to read the list of their names. They are E. Smith, B. Lewitt, F. Burdett, F. Bromwich, Edward Johnson, William Johnson, Hilton Johnson. That's right, there were 3 brothers in that team: Frank Gardner, Arthur West, Arthur Ashby and Sam Dingley. And as I say, they probably had no clue how far their club would go, but I'm sure they would be proud. That is how to start a football club, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much.